I went to many war I went to many war protests during this year. I went to a really big one with I really went to a really big demonstration one time in downtown Detroit that contained thousands of people. I felt really happy that there were at least some people in this world feeling the desire of world peace and not supporting war, and and under and feel like they had an idea of what the true way was. However, I noticed even some war protests were filled with hate and aggression. People often shouted in megaphones saying cuss words. I wish people understood that love and peace is the way, not anger, aggression, and greed, and competition and hate. These kind of feelings only keep us away from spiritual truth and mastering inner peace on a global level. I continued my friendship with Tom. I really liked him because he often didn't agree with today's politics either. I still hung out with a lot of I still hung out with him a lot. However, he started making bad decisions in life and started hanging out with people that did drugs. Many of these people even though a lot of these people did drugs, I decided to still hang out with Tom and hang out with them. I still enjoyed socializing with them, and it still developed my social skills. I just felt like I just knew better not to get involved in the drugs. And the funny thing was, whenever someone did ask me if I wanted to smoke a joint or drink a beer, I told them no, and they actually respected that. Again, it was weird. The people that seemed to do drugs again seemed more nicer and actually less judgmental than most of the people that didn't do that stuff in Grosse Pointe. I met a friend named Nick who I liked. We often hung out a lot after school with my girlfriend. He seemed to not be judgmental around me, and I really liked that. I often felt like I could be myself around him, and I really enjoyed that. We had a lot of fun together. However, he didn't have a lot of interests that really matched mine. He was mostly interested in novels and history. Nonetheless, I still did enjoy hanging out with him. My Asperger's friends were still probably on the top of my list in regard to people that I could relate to the most. I always felt like I could relate the most with Scott, Jeff, Hari, and I felt like I could pretty much talk to anything the most. I at that time at least felt like I needed more friends however felt like I needed some more friends that didn't have an Asperger's disability like me that could challenge me socially. In spite of the fact that I had trouble finding the right kind of friends that I could relate to, I did know this one guy named Dave Parrish who did. I met Dave Parrish through my Asperger's friends. Dave and I used to go to do a lot of fun things together. We used to go downtown Detroit and explore abandoned buildings every Friday after school. We especially did that a lot towards the end of 2003. Even though I felt that going to abandoned buildings was risky, we loved it. Some of the buildings we snuck into were over 30 stories high. We often dropped large stuff down the elevator shafts at the top of the buildings and hear it make a loud crash in the distance several seconds later. We found a lot of cool stuff in these old vacant abandoned buildings. Many of the buildings became abandoned many decades ago because Detroit went bankrupt many decades ago, and it was like going back in time. The view of the city from the roof above was spectacular. We could see I enjoyed looking at all the streets and all the lights that went out in every direction, and looking out the buildings almost vanish as far as your eyes can see. My friend Dave unfortunately moved at the end of 2003 though, because he found a girlfriend that he ended up marrying located several cities away. By the beginning of fall, I started to like Lorena even more. As I liked her more and more, it was funny. She seemed to like me less and less, and I didn't understand why. I didn't think I was do anything wrong with our relationship. I always tried to be nice to her, and I always was sweet to her, and I bought her things, and I tried to do fun things with her, but it was like she didn't really want to do fun things with me, and I wasn't sure why. On top of that, we never really hugged and kissed, or we never really hugged. She never really hugged or kissed me that much, and hung outside of school that much. I became increasingly bothered by it. I wanted to talk to her about it, but I was always unsure how to express myself without the possibility of making things worse. I knew not having a car wasn't helping either, and I wished my parents would let me get my license. At that time, I noticed she was also starting to appear like she was flirting with other guys, including my best friend Nick. Lorena eventually dumped me. She dumped me during my senior year of the homecoming dance. She went out with Nick shortly after our breakup. I stopped being friends with Nick later on because I was upset about what he did. I sometimes believe that he actually tried to break me and Lorena up. It took me a long while to get over the anger and resentment I had with Lorena. I felt like she was not very nice to me during our relationship. Between Lorena and Jenny, I found it was very hard to let go of resentment in keeping the positive, God-loving perspective. Anger just kept resurfacing. I kept thinking about all the things that they did that was mean. And I felt like I just couldn't get over it, and it was really annoying me. In spite of the struggles I had with not getting upset sometimes and mastering their peace, I felt like I did learn a lot this year. I learned that getting good grades in school depends not only on the amount of time you spend on studying, but how you study. You have to be organized, and you got to break your goals down into small chunks. Also, my school counselor told me that studying is not just memorizing facts, but more about learning the underlying meaning of the facts and seeing how they connect and relate to each other. I learned looking over the chapter review is helpful when doing that. When studying, I found it's always good to read all the questions in the end of each chapter. When you need to study terms, I found it helpful to quiz yourself by covering up the definition of the terms, and then seeing if you can remember it, and then seeing if you're right by uncovering them. I learned being organized is the key to successful studying. Being organized reduces stress and prevents you from forgetting important tasks. I've always struggled with short-term memory, and writing things down always minimizes your chances of forgetting. I also learned socially I learned that when you have a girlfriend, or if you're trying to flirt with a girl, it's not good to look like you're too desperate. I learned that when I liked Lorena, I came on too strong towards the end. When I started liking her, she liked me less because I was starting to look like I was being too dependent on her, and maybe I was smothering her. I really don't know, but I read some books where I've learned that. I also learned that when you set a goal for yourself, it's always a good idea to set realistic goals instead of trying to achieve something huge. Setting a huge goal will sound exciting, but most likely you're going to fail and become disappointed. I did fail a lot of goals this year, but I failed most of the goals outlined on that list I showed you for this year. However, I did achieve some, and I did learn the reason why I failed most of them. I made that mistake when setting goals, in that I will set smaller, easier goals next year. When setting goals, I also learned it's helpful to make a checkoff list to let you know if you're on track throughout the year. You have to break it down into small chunks and check off each chunk instead of trying to do one huge thing at once. Doing this will also let you know you're ahead or behind. You'll know how much you need to catch up if you are behind. Next year, in 2004, I plan on setting myself some better goals with the knowledge I learned from this year. I wanted to set a lot of goals to inspire growing more. However, I didn't want to make them so hard that I would end up failing. So I made a lot of smaller goals instead. This time, I had a feeling that I would do well. I had a feeling that this coming year I might achieve all my goals, and I will be able to celebrate that imaginary celebration at the Detroit train station like I hoped this year. Now let's see if I do.